Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Stool podcast, a podcast for woodworkers and the maker community in general. This is episode number 4. My name is Robin Lewis from robinlewismakes.com. I'm joined by Joey Chalk from King Post Timberworks and Jordan Crawford from Periodic Furniture Studio.
Hello.
We live stream the recording on YouTube every Thursday evening at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, or UTC plus 10. Or you can watch or listen to it later on YouTube, iTunes, or SoundCloud. I want to say hello to everyone in the chat. We'll get your comments as much as possible as we go, but feel free to chat amongst yourselves. The idea is that this is also a place for people to meet. We've got a couple of announcements this week. The first one is that the podcast is now officially on iTunes. We set that up last week, so you can go. There's a link in this video down below where you can go and link to the iTunes store, and you can get this podcast. Or if you're doing the whole podcasting thing already, this should be coming up in your feed if you subscribe to it. So we're pretty excited about that. The second thing is, if you didn't join us last week, Jordan had a bit of an accident with one of his tools, which was a bit of an eye-opener. We all discussed it and talked about some of the safety concerns last week, which was pretty interesting. But Jordan, how is the finger doing?
Surprisingly well. So I've had my first round of hand therapy yesterday where I finally got to see the repair. And it's short, but not as short as it could have been. It's pretty gross underneath this, but if you want to see it, I can take it off.
What is that? What have you got on it?
It's a cap, so I'll take the cap off. The cap is just to protect me from bumping it.
Right.
And then this black sleeve is compression to reshape my finger because it's pretty gross. Should I take it off and show you guys, or?
I'm not sure if we should do that live.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see, but yeah, I don't know if we should.
I'll tell you what, if you guys are interested, I will do a video on my channel where there's plenty of warning for it, but it's pretty gross. But you know, I've got a lot of movement back already, which is great for second day of therapy. Still a long way to go, but
so is it still really sore, or are you feeling like you've got some feeling?
Today is my first day with no strong pain meds, so no like oxycodone or anything, and it's been pretty good. Sorry, yesterday was, and now the only pain is when I actually touch it. The most disgusting thing is that, well, I say disgusting, it's my finger, but I have to massage the scar.
Oh,
and it's like it's not pain as such, it's just really unpleasant because you're on the tip of my finger, but it feels like I'm massaging down around halfway down as well, which is throwing me. But yeah, no, it's going well. Recovery is going to be, lots of repetitive exercise, but no, I'm happy. High spirited anyway.
Yeah, that's good.
Stupid.
Have you had that feeling now? I know obviously you've only lost a small amount of your finger, but people talk about that. What's that?
Phantom.
Yeah, like
phantom pain.
Well, I don't know if that's the term. It's the one where you, like when someone's arm gets cut off, they can still feel their arm, but it's not there.
Yeah, especially before I had the bandage off. Ooh. I could feel the kind of fingertip, which is no longer there. So yesterday so my first time it was out of the bandage and I was looking at it, I actually felt really sick, just because I'm a pansy when it comes to
I think I would too though.
But now that I've had a full 24 hours to kind of get used to it, I don't have that pain anymore. The weird pain is it's in my elbow because of the tendon runs all the way up.
Yeah.
Anyway. All I will say to everyone is don't cut your finger off. It's not worth it. It's just horrible.
I'll tell you what, this week I was working on my jointer and I was so nervous the whole time. But there was something you said in the episode last week where you noticed, as it happened, you noticed an impact.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that is sort of stuck in my mind because that's very descriptive. I can imagine, obviously I can't imagine, but I can get close to imagining what that impact must feel like. And that's sort of your initial, and ever since you've said that, that it was like a massive impact, that sort of really stuck with me. So while I was using my jointer last week, I was nervous.
I mean, be aware of it, but don't do it.
I can relate to the impact because when I shot myself in the forearm with my nail gun, it felt like a sledgehammer hit my arm.
Yeah.
That's all I remember is this massive whack on my arm. I dropped my nail gun. Oh, I didn't have a nail gun in that hand. I dropped whatever, a big wooden beam, I think it was. And then I was just like, holy crap, what happened? It's such a weird thing.
It's I guess that's the energy, whatever it is, it's that massive amount of energy that's hitting your body. So regardless of whether it's a nail going through or a blade, it just translates into impact. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Nerves aren't used to that, so.
All right. Well, it's good to hear that you are on the mend. That's good to hear. I mean, it's only been a week.
It's a week today or yesterday. So
yes, that's pretty good.
Very positive.
All right. Well, with that in mind, have you been able to work on anything this week, or have you not even come close to the shop?
Okay. So yes, I have been able to work on stuff. Not very well. So Monday I went in. So that countertop install from hell last week. I still had to do one piece of trim for a cabinet that wasn't yet installed. Now that was installed. So I went into the workshop to thickness down a strip and cut a bevel on it using the saw. And that was quite possibly the hardest thing I've had to do with one hand, because this hand at that stage wasn't able to bend because of the shock. That's the only thing I've worked on. So I finished that install. Other than that, I've just been working on the business, which is actually, I mean, I hate to say it's a godsend having a finger cut off, but it is good to be forced to sit down and think about it. So that's all I've really had the chance to do and recover. The first few days of this, I was just out of it. So not a huge amount, unfortunately. What about you?
So I have been working on, it's been a pretty quiet week for me as well, but I've just been working on chopping boards. The one chopping board is for a video which is coming out this weekend, and it's a Christmas present. The second one is I've got an agreement with a company over in the US where I make videos for them for a small fee. And so it's been a while since I've been able to put one of these videos together. But yeah, I've sort of promised them a video. So I thought while I'm in the chopping board mood, I'll put together a chopping board. So my workshop just smells like orange oil, because that's what I've been finishing them with. This workshop just smells amazing at the moment. So, so it's just been 2 chopping boards for me this week.
Are they? Sorry,
I was just going to say, are they end grain or long grain or?
No. So they're both. Do you do edge grain? I mean, is that different to long grain?
Oh, sort of.
No, it's just how the timber looks, I suppose. It'll be quarter sawn or flat sawn.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So from that perspective, I'll be honest, I'm not even sure which one it is. All I know is I've been using the edge of boards. But yeah, so no, not end grain. That is on the list. I do want to get to that sometime. But because the one was a Christmas present, I was just trying to get it done as quick as possible. Yeah. I'm off to Adelaide tomorrow for about a week, so I had to get everything done today.
Yeah.
And that video for this company that I was talking about, it's all very beginner-oriented stuff. So the idea of doing end grain it's just becoming too advanced.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's me. And you, Joey?
Okay, so hectic craziness. So we
saw your altar.
Yeah, last weekend we moved into the new house, so that's where I'm sitting, locked away in the media room. That there is the guitar I made that one and bought that one. If you can't tell.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've never seen a sound hole with that design, so I assumed it would be some custom.
So what am I working on? So I finished the altar. I'm delivering that tomorrow morning. And on Instagram, I mentioned that I lost the footage for it, or half of the footage, so I couldn't put the video out. But I just found the footage, so I'm just editing it right now. So all things going well, right after the podcast, I'm going to do the voiceover, and that video will be out. So that's good. In the workshop, I smashed through this outdoor lounge suite stuff out of Iroko. So I've got 2 3-seaters and a single-seater sofa ready for the upholstery. It's all finished, oiled. I've still got another couple of pieces for that job, but probably won't get to that this year. Next week, I'm installing all week, every day, dropping something off, or I've got a massive install to do. So that's what I'm gearing up for. So yeah, just super busy. And hopefully I can get my jobs finished on time so people will pay me before Christmas Day. Otherwise, everything gets held up. And I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah. I must say, when you said last week that you were doing an altar, in my head, I just thought that there was some like technical term for something, but I wasn't sure exactly what it was.
Right.
Like I didn't realize that it was actually going to be like an altar, like a church altar. And when I saw the picture on Instagram, I was like, oh, wow. My brain didn't even go to that. I just immediately thought that it was some term that I didn't understand.
Right.
It's
not what I would picture as an altar. And to me, if you were to take the 3 little carving blocks off it, it would just be a really nice albeit high side table with a pull-out shelf for some reason.
Yeah, actually, that's right. Yeah, I guess I didn't think of that. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to get into tonight's topic. This was Jordan's idea. So what we're going to talk about tonight are lessons in the shop generally that we wish we'd learned earlier on. So stuff that we'd either been doing wrong along the way and we figured out a better way to do it, or just something that we hadn't thought about that we wish we'd thought of earlier. So Jordan, your topic, I'm going to let you start us off with something.
Okay. Yeah, I know it was my topic, but I am a little bit, it's strange because I've been doing it for so long. It's hard to think back to before I did it the wrong way. But I think for me anyway, that my biggest point of things I wish I was doing from day one is not machining my timber on the jointer and thicknesser before breaking it down to its individual parts. So when I first started out in, just in my garage, I would take my piece of wood. If it was 2 meters long, 3 meters long, I'll joint it. I'll send it through the thicknesser, square up the edge. And, I might have started with a 50 mil thick piece of wood. And now by the time it was all done, that 50 mil is down to 35 because a 3 meter length, it's going to have a little bit of twist. It's going to have more bow. And really, let's say that piece had 4 legs coming out of it. I could have cut it to 800 mil, two lengths of that, then done the same exercise, and I would still have 49 mil left instead of 50. It's something that seems so simple now, but back then it was not all that obvious to me.
So maybe explain, I'd get you fully, but mainly it's because of, let's say, a 3 meter piece. Let's say it has a 15 mil bow in it end to end.
Yeah. So basically, every time you cut a board down, the defects in it, as far as twist, warping, and bow, gets halved or greater than. So, over the entire length of the piece, you might have, like you say, 15 mil of bow to it. Well, when you cut that in the middle, that 15 mil of bow is now 7 or less. So essentially what you're doing by rough cutting your parts out of the stock before machining it is getting rid of as much waste material beforehand, I guess is a way of wording it. And, retaining as much thickness, really. Often it doesn't matter, but if it's something that's crucial, like a leg coming out.
I was just going to say, legs is one of the big ones. I do the same thing because often you're just trying to build up a big, especially if you want to end up with something close to 100 by 100 or 90 by 90, you want to machine as little as possible off your 50 mil stock.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, that's probably the biggest thing as well is legs. Generally, if you're doing it for tabletop glue ups, you're going to machine the entire length anyway because it's a tabletop. But in times that you can, it's worth doing. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that point.
I was just going to say, I'm pretty sure you've either talked about this in videos or you've done a video specifically about it.
Yeah, I did a twisted video, which is basically the same concept, where I talked about best way to remove twist in a board, and that was to actually rip it down the middle, machine it, and then join it back together, which is counteractive. And that's probably where I talked about this as well.
Well, I'm just thinking what I'll probably do then is at the end of this, on the YouTube video, I'll put a link to that video, just because I remember seeing that, and at the time when I watched that video, my immediate reaction was, oh, geez, I didn't even think about that. You know, you don't think about that type of thing until it's actually shown to you physically happening, and then it made total sense.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, I had a note here on the same lines, but more to do with, for me, for when I'm pricing jobs, but just for anyone who is trying to work out how much timber they need for a job. I used to be as tight as I could. So if I needed a piece of 150 by 50, the thickness is never really going to change, but the width, the suppliers have random width boards. And so if I wanted a piece of 150, I would go and pick out like a piece of 155. So I didn't have to buy too much wastage. And by the time, like Jordan just said, by the time you actually get that piece to the dimension it needs to be, you're well under that 150, because there's more than a 5mm bow or twist in just about any piece of timber. Just getting the roughness off sometimes is 3mm. So if I need a finished 150, I'm buying 180 minimum.
Yeah.
Most of the time. And they've just got to charge for it, and the client just has to pay for the sawdust, because otherwise they're not getting what they need. So that's a massive one. It really stresses you out if you suddenly are like 5mm under, you're 145, and then suddenly the bench top or the tabletop's 10mm, 20mm narrower than it should be, and you're buggered. You've got to put a little strip in somewhere.
And it does. It compiles. Like this piece might only be 0.5mm under dimension, but by the time you get to the end of it, the overall thing is 5mm too low, or 10mm even. So it's important to leave adequate stock.
From a quoting perspective, you don't say to your clients, I'm going to give you a 150 by 150 leg, and then you hand it over to them and they pull out the tape measure and start checking. I mean, surely if it was a 145, they wouldn't. Or is it more just from the overall design and how it builds up?
You go, Jordan.
For me, I always have a plus or minus variance when I'm talking to the client. So I say, we do everything we can to get it to this dimension, but be prepared that it may be 5mm shorter or longer, because accidents happen in that way. I've got a safety, but I always aim to say that if I'm saying this is going to be 745, it's going to be 745.
That's a good thing to actually write that down. I've never written anything like that down. That's how I work, though. I've got about the same kind of thing. I guess if I say to someone you're going to have a piece of 150 by 50, it doesn't have to be that size. It could be 145, but by the time I have to stop somewhere, like I have to have a goal. Otherwise, I could just keep machining down and keep going and keep going. So at some point, I've got to say, right, this is my goal. I'm going to go for 150, and if I'm a mil under, that's okay. But you need to stop and say this is it at some point. Yep. Right.
I guess my next point, while we're on machining side of things, would be another lesson which I learned really early on with my first fairly cheap jointer was don't fight your machines. And this is universal on every machine. If you feel like you're getting more resistance than you should, or you're having to wrestle a workpiece to get it machined, stop and reassess, because obviously something's going to be wrong. What brought me up to this point, though, is actually edge jointing, which is funny with my finger, but when you're edge jointing, all you need is the minimum amount of pressure on that fence that's required, because if you're putting all your body weight into it like I did when I first got a jointer, you're going to deflect that fence from 90 degrees. And you're going to be getting frustrated that your boards aren't coming out how you want them. And it's just, you don't need to put all your weight into a machine. If it's set up correctly and you're using it properly, it should be a fairly simple task of just a little bit of pressure, sending it through, and you're done. it's, like I said, it's not a huge thing, but it is something I wish I learned before destroying so many edges, like glue ups, and having to have a straight edge, but I still have to rip that straight edge off on the panel saw or the table saw at that stage to have it 90 degrees.
I've actually always put a lot of pressure on the board to the point where I can sometimes see the fence bend. So that's interesting that you say that. I have always done that, put a lot of pressure up against that fence.
It's what you'd think. And the other thing goes with it, even when you're face jointing, if you put too much pressure on there, boards deflect. So if you're putting heaps of pressure down and you've got a cup in that board, you might be flattening out that cup, but when you take the pressure off, it springs back. So it's got to be minimum amount of pressure for all those sorts of jointing tasks, because you don't want to deflect that wood as well.
Yeah, I was always taught let the tool do the work, and so that was mainly when I was learning first how to use a handsaw. Let the saw do the work. Don't put your shoulder and all that into it. Don't force. If the blade of the saw is jamming, that's because you're pushing it too hard. So and then really that rule goes for all in power tools as well. Just let the tool do all the hard work. There are a few exceptions, like this week I had when I was cutting the Iroko, which is, I think I mentioned earlier, notoriously bad at moving after it's cut. And so I'm trying to rip some pieces on the table saw. And if I tell you, if I didn't have the riving knife in, I'd be shot across the room. This stuff was pinching so badly that I actually had to use all my effort just to keep pushing the timber through. And eventually it pinched on itself and got around the riving knife, and then I could carry on through. But yeah, generally you don't want to be pushing at all, really.
This week I've been on the jigsaw, and that was one of the first tools that I really worked that out with the forcing it. Is as soon as you put too much pressure on that jigsaw, you end up with the most
drift.
The drift and the deflection is terrible. And that's, you've got to take your time and let the tool do everything.
No, totally.
Talking about the joiner, I want to jump in there and add one of my points, because I also had a jointer one as well. The jointer, in my mind, was always such a, like, you get the jointer when you're at a specific level of woodworking, or you are trying to mill your own, raw, rough timber. I didn't realize how important a jointer was for a glue up. Now, I mean, I'm pretty sure that you can get into it with a hand plane and learn the skills and techniques with using a hand plane, but I don't want to say I don't have the time for that, but like, that's not a priority for me. When I got my first jointer, the setting up the knives was always a bit of a fear for me, because everyone says it's this long job and it takes forever. I got my first jointer having never even touched a jointer before. Set the blades up first time. I mean, they're probably not accurate to the thousandth or whatever they talk about, but it's good enough. But the difference that it's had on my glue ups has been astronomical. From what I've figured out from that machine, I would say if you want to do glue ups, you need to try and get yourself a jointer as quickly as possible, because it is so much more than just a way of milling rough sawn timber.
Well, it's a joinery machine. It's the vital part for joinery. So
you really have to think of a joiner as just a giant hand plane upside down with a motor on it. That's what it's doing.
Cuts fingers off.
Yeah.
But you always see it as like a big machine. And for me, the cabinet machines, as someone who's still working his way into having a full workshop setup, cabinet machines are the next step. It's moving away from power tools and going to the next step. So I've always seen it as that type of tool that you need to be at the next level, but it really shouldn't. If you want to do, glue ups and tables and coffee tables and that type of thing, that should be just as important as, in my opinion, and maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion because I'm so impressed with how it works, but that should be as important as your drill and your circular saw, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, I agree and I disagree. I agree to the point that it will make your life so much easier and increase your productivity, but you don't need it to just do simple tasks. But when you want to get into that next level of having, tight glue joints and have accurate layout, because you've got a square edge to reference off of, and all of those sorts of things. To me, it's vital. But you can always buy your wood, which is squared up pretty close, and get away with it. But if you have the means, I would totally recommend it as one of your early machine purchases for sure.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. Yeah, so if you just buy all your lumber dimensional, then you would hope that you shouldn't have to worry about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can get away without it, but
I've done that before. I've made a solid timber kitchen carcass out of pine, and I just bought dressed four-side boards and just straight off the shelf glue them together. Works
Putty
fine.
does wonderful things.
You just twist it into any shape you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. So I guess, yeah, as long as you can get your hands on some dimensional dimensional lumber, like I guess, yeah, for me, it's been working with the reclaimed Jarrah. It's just been paramount for that.
And that is one thing that I'll say, that a lot of people will complain that we haven't got materials available to us in Australia. And I mean, I disagree with that because it is everywhere, but mostly it's salvaged wood. So if you're wanting to get your hands on free or cheap wood, like, old roof rafters or pallet wood even, having a jointer means that you'll have access to all this wood that otherwise would have been unusable.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah, I think for me anyway, that's probably everything machining wise. Do you guys have any other machine sort of points?
I don't. Joey, if you do.
I actually found this really difficult to come up with a load of things because I know I've got tons of them, but it's
hard to remember them, right?
Remembering, and all week I was thinking, oh, is this a lesson? Is this a lesson? Like, so nothing on machines as such. Maybe the only lesson that I can think of right now on machines is if you've got a decent saw or some tools that are going to make a lot of dust and you're ready to buy a dust extractor, just spend the money on decent ducting. Like,
that's the point I have
go for corrugated, flexi hose just for the little parts that need it. When I upgraded to a steel pipe, 150 mil smooth bore, it upgraded the suction on my saw like 10 times to the point now where I can actually hear the air sucking into the pipe at my table saw. It just sounds like a funnel of air coming, and that's what you want, and that catches every last bit of dust, and you won't get clogs up and all that kind of stuff. So that is you just got to set it up. Otherwise, the machine, I did some maths on it, something like every meter of corrugated hose, you lose 10% of suction.
Yeah.
So,
you're talking that's that flexible, semi-transparent. Yeah. To add on to your point, I had a dust collection point, which is very similar, but it's don't scrimp on it, because if you're trying to save money in the early stages of your dust collection by, using crappy pipe or having less suction than ideal,
or going for shop vacs instead of proper
units.
Going for
shop vacs. To me, anyway, it is been my biggest expense is my dust collection, because I started with little units which weren't big enough. I knew they weren't big enough, but I've spent so much money over the last 2 years trying to get it right, when if I had just spent the money to get it right to begin with, I would have been way happier. Because for me anyway, if I have dust all over my shop, I find it really hard to work. I can deal with clutter, but when there's a film of dust on everything, it makes me uncomfortable. And that
I have a dusty shop and a cluttered shop sometimes, but it's way not as dusty as it could be if my extractor wasn't working properly.
Yeah, like I've got a video hopefully coming out anyway about my dust collection, because I've finally bought myself a big 3-phase collector a while ago, but it's old, so the bags on it were really clogged up.
Right.
And I was making do with it, and I just said that I can get the bags for $150. I'll do it, and it's improved the suction by easily. I'd say better than 100% improvement.
Is that new bags, or have you put the cartridge filter type?
Just bags. The cartridge filters for that size weren't, because it's so old, the bore of the drum.
Yeah,
I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I upgraded the cartridge filters, which again improved the suction probably on my machine, probably another 40%. And they're just awesome. That's just, yeah, brilliant.
I see Cuffy's just jumped in there. My dust extraction sucks in the bad way. After a day, my throat is burning. That was, for me, was working with Jarrah in my nose. I could feel that burn, and that was something that I picked up on straight away. I don't own a big unit, the proper 3-phase, what Jordan was talking about. And all the shops that I've ever worked in leading up to this point have all been sort of half open, under carports, that kind of thing. And it was only when I shut myself into a sealed room, started cutting, did I realize just how much sawdust actually comes out if you don't have.
Oh yeah.
And since then, now I'm scrambling to put something together because I didn't realize just how bad it is. And as what Cuffy was saying, I did a couple of boards of Jarrah through the thickness planer, and I just had to walk out for the next hour to wait for everything to settle, because you can't just sort of breathe through it. And even your dust masks are just and it's not enough.
And especially with Jarrah, it's just so fine.
Robin, assumably you don't have a shop vac yet. Or have you got a vacuum?
Yeah, I've got one of the little 38 mil.
So as I was going to say, you just said about Jordan's 3-phase extractor. Now you don't need 3-phase as the big boys, and mine's 3-phase. You don't need that big.
No.
You can buy for the same price as a shop vac, like a vacuum cleaner. You can buy a dust extractor with 100 mil bore on it. Smaller bags, but you way more suction and way more storage in the bag than a vacuum anyway.
It's high volume, low pressure, and all that, and then a shop vac's high pressure, low volume, and it's
so a lot of people have said to me there was a vacuum by the was full bore. I think you've got the full bore drill press, Jordan.
Yeah.
So Bunnings had a full bore proper shop vac.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Apparently they've stopped selling it now. So the next one that I was looking at is Jet make a unit which is obviously a bit dearer because it's Jet, but I think it's about $700, which really isn't that bad. It's about taking that step.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of dust collectors. So I started with a similar full bore one, the same design anyway, just rebranded. It was a HAFCO one. And I would say that if you see yourself getting more than 2 tools that you want to use it on, go the next level up. So the one with an actual blower. But I would say the Hare and Forbes machinery house, Hare and Forbes that is, those units are actually pretty good. They're a little bit loud. They're not quite as polished and well off as the Carbotech unit I had was. But you're getting a 3-way port on the actual nozzle, so you can hook it up directly into 3 machines if you wanted to. I'd suggest going solid pipe to the machines and all of that for efficiency, but you could do it. And the price they come up with every now and again is less than $500 for a 2-bag collector. I mean, if you weren't in Adelaide, I have a spare one sitting in my shop. I'll totally send it to you, but it's in Townsville even. But
Townsville,
yeah. But something tells me freight is not going to like that.
Yeah, and it's going to go down along the coast the whole way as well, so it's not even. But it is. Dust collection has been I wish I wasn't behind. I wish I'd kept up with it, because now, it's a disaster.
I would suggest, because it's always going to be the way, if you're looking at it for your first time, go a minimum of 1200 CFM, because that rating will half after the bags get clogged. Yeah. So if you're looking at the smaller 700 CFM units, you're really getting like 400 after a while. So by going 1200 or 1600, you're actually going to have some decent suction even after a long time of using it.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing to think about, I know we're getting onto extraction now, but it's not the topic. But if you just use the standard filter bags, they only go down to maybe 1 micron of dust. And so the air that's coming out through that filter is still coming out dust laden. And if you've got your dust extractor sitting in the corner of your workshop, you're just filling the workshop with the fine dust you can't see, which is what you shouldn't be breathing. So ideally, you want your extractor to be sitting outside, if you can wangle that, or get replacement filters that are down to kind of under half a micron, ideally.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe this should be a topic for the future.
Yeah, it's a whole topic.
Yeah, it is.
A lot to it. Joey, did you have anything?
Okay, so the example I'm going to give is about dovetails, but I think everyone will be able to extrapolate this. So when I started cutting very, very fine pins, dovetails, I didn't really give any thought to how I was actually going to make cut the pinhole that's such a fine needle point. And so by the time because I would cut my tails first, and I'm then scribing this tiny pin slot, and my chisel is 4 mil, and the smallest chisel I have is 4 mil, and the pin slot is like 2.5 mil, and so there's no way that's happening. So the lesson there is make grooves, rebates, dados in the same multiples as your other tools that you are going to use to clean that out. So it's pretty standard probably for a lot of us metric guys. So if you're cutting an 18 mil groove for some plywood, you're probably going to have an 18 mil chisel. That's not necessarily so though, but think about that when you are buying tools, is that if I'm going to need to cut an 18 mil groove and I need to buy an 18 mil router bit, I should probably check if I've got an 18 mil chisel or anything else that is going to need. So when I make, anytime I do like a frame and panel for doors, if it's veneered or even if it's painted, I always buy 6 mil sheet goods, either plywood or MDF, and I know I've got a 6.5 mil cutter, and that slides in perfectly. And so it's just a matter of having these kind of systems, I think, in place where you know that this tool works well for this process. Otherwise, you really get stuck if you don't have the tool that fits in the hole, so to speak.
Yeah, that's very true. One of the best investments I made was buying a 19 mil router bit, because now whenever I need to put a table frame together, that's what my rails go into. And it was something. It was so simple that I just didn't think about it at the time when I bought my router. And then I looked through all the sizes, and of course that's why you have a 19 mil router bit, because it's made because all the timber comes in 19 mil. So
standard.
Try and get all your sizes to work out with, all your tool sizes to work out with your timber. Yeah.
Otherwise, especially if you're doing super custom things where you're not using sheet goods, say you're making a frame and panel door and you're doing a raised panel, timber panel, sometimes you'll make the panel first, which is sometimes a good idea. And if you just make the tongue on that raised panel a random size, and then you've got to try and make that same groove in the door styles, it's a real bugger. Say you've got like 16 mil, which is a router bit size I have, but you might have to then get, say, a small 9 mil router bit and make 2 passes, and that's just always a bugger to set up the other side of the groove. So that's definitely quicker to go in bit sizes or cutter sizes.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say I've done that too many times of size it, but not actually be able to size it.
Yeah.
But I didn't learn.
Robin, anything?
Well, the one that I was mentioning this morning on Facebook, and this is, I guess, this is a bit of a broader topic. When I was starting out, I didn't realize. I mean, I knew about milling timber to get it as square as possible, but I hadn't yet worked out what needed to be square. So a lot of the time, for myself anyway, I was trying to get everything perfectly square. Now, an example of where you don't need that, in one of the recent builds that I did, that Jarrett table, you've got a leg, which was 40 by 40, 750 or 760 long. If that timber isn't perfectly flat, probably not going to notice. You could have a 5 mil, twist or sort of curve, you're probably never going to notice that. But anywhere that you're joining timber, you need it to be perfect. So that's sort of separating where things need to be square and where things, they need to be close to square. For me, there was a real big thing to work out what was and wasn't okay. And I remember Jimmy DeResta once saying, if it looks square, then it is square. Or sorry, if it looks straight, then it is straight.
That's a very old saying.
Yeah. And I think you've got to take it with a grain of salt, because obviously if you can do everything square, well, that's perfect. But do you want to spend 2 hours trying to get a leg straight when really no one's going to notice it, and you could be, putting your time into something else?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. If it looks flat, it is flat. I mean, I have to remind myself that on every dining table I make, because wood moves. It will cup, it will do. I mean, I've learnt, which is another lesson, that if you're not working on your tabletop that's glued up, cover it with a sheet so it minimizes the amount of movement. But if it looks like it's got a little bit of cup coming into it, well, guess what? The base will take that out of it if you brace it correctly anyway.
Yeah.
So, I don't really get my ruler out, my straight edge, and check it to be dead flat that often. It has to be damn close for me to pass it off. But if it's not dead flat, if it feels it, it's fine.
Yeah, well, my rule of thumb is for tables, if you put a plate on it and it rocks around,
that's not good enough. Yeah. I'm talking really minimal amount of out of flatness.
Robin, I fully agree with you, but even more so that and I've thought this for a long time, and it was nicely confirmed to me reading the article in Mortise and Tenon magazine about this very thing, was you only need 2 square reference faces, and it usually, and let's say the aprons of a table, you're only going to see one side of that, and the other side can still have bark on it for all I care. It doesn't matter what the inside of it looks like. And now there are schools of thought where furniture makers try and make every face pristinely perfect. Now, I absolutely don't fall into that category. When I was touring through Europe, I was sticking my camera under every piece of furniture I could find. And in the most prestigious castles and buildings, you might have gold leaf and all sorts of filigree on the outside, and underneath you still see chisel marks, plane marks, just terrible, like rough sawn timber. And on the outside, it's like this super veneered, Bombay chest or whatever. And, if that's good enough for the old masters, then that's bloody well good enough for me. So I'm not going to spend half my day trying to make the inside of a chest of drawers look beautiful. It's just not, there's no point to it.
No. It's the exact same method of you have your witness lines, so you know which faces you reference off the entire time. It's the old school mark out routine. Those 2 faces are the show faces.
And I think there's also a bit of merit in the idea that it is handmade, and not to say that you can just be slack about everything, but it is handmade. It hasn't come out of an industrial machine. So your little nicks here and there, if you end up being the next fantastic, world-class designer, people are going to look at that and go, oh, that was his genius coming out. Whereas now you look at it and you're saying, well, it's because I suck as a woodworker. So it just depends how you want to showcase those little nuances.
I think Jordan will probably have a slightly different opinion with me, in that it's when you're making a piece for yourself, you can do that. There's a point where I've certainly had clients say, oh, you haven't finished that piece. And I'm like, no, that's like the bottom of the thing. You're never going to see it. Oh, well, that's not good enough. And so clients definitely have an expectation to a point. Some clients are sweet. They don't care about it. Others will go, hey, how come you haven't done this? And I always say, well, do you look at the bottom of your kitchen bench top? Like, does it? I bet it's not got anything on it. I bet it's just raw MDF. But it's definitely there's a point to where the roughness needs to kind of be filtered out.
I think it's, for me and my furniture anyway, I think it's fine to have tool marks, hidden tool marks, but I always make it look presentable. Like it's always, if I finish the top, I finish the bottom. If it may be 3 coats on the top and only 1 on the bottom, but it's a thick coat on the bottom. That sort of stuff. So it always looks right, but tool marks and stuff, I always leave, if there's a dent on the underside or chisel mark that is still there, to me, it doesn't matter. And my clients have never complained, but I think I finish everything way too much than I have to.
Yeah. All right. Do you guys have any others that you want to
I have got one thing that I could be interesting, which is finishing, because I know that I spray most of my finishes. It's a lacquer spray, and Joe, you mostly use oils, and Rob, you use a lot of varnishes. So a big trick, because I'm not a polisher. I mean, I did it at uni. I did 1 class with an actual professional polisher, and that was it. But one thing I wish I learned way earlier, because I would have saved myself a lot of effort, is keep the puddle wet when you're spraying a finish. So for me, that means that if I'm going to be finishing a big top, which is, let's say 1.5 meters wide, don't spray from the middle out because it gets easier, and then go to the other side and pick up from the middle and come out. You need to keep that puddle wet so the finish actually melts into itself. So start on the edge, work toward the middle, then walk around to the other side of that top and pick it up from the middle. Keeping that wet edge is going to make your finish look so much better. And, you always have to finish a finish, but sometimes if it's most of the time now, I'd just take it off the gun, that's it, finished. And that wasn't the case for the longest of time because I wasn't keeping the puddle wet.
Yeah, that's pretty much the rule of thumb, I think, for all finishes, is you've got to keep working that wet edge. I absolutely agree. I mean, just to clarify, I started using oil finishes and I was getting awesome results. Oh, sorry. You mean like Danish oil, don't you, Jordan?
Yeah. So
right. So that's I would do 50-50 depending on what clients want. I started doing like oil-based polyurethane finishes, and I did it an old school way where you mix it down like 50-50 with terps. So it's really watered down, and you just rub it on with your hands, like with gloved hands, like massage the liquid into the timber.
It's like the candles and the scented oils is optional.
And you kind of let it pool a little bit, and then after a couple of minutes, wipe it off. 3 or 4 of those, and you've got the glass finish. The problem is it takes so long to dry, and you're going to have dust in it. It's not great. So probably in the last year, I've changed over to just about solely water-based finished.
I was going to say, you're always using water-based, aren't you?
Yeah, and I can get 3 coats on in a day. The heat we've got at the moment. The problem is now, it's so hot that I can't keep a wet edge.
Which was, it's exactly what I was going to ask you about, Joe, because I can't, and maybe we should keep this as, a separate topic.
Yeah.
But that's my problem with the water-based is I know you use the pad, but if you're trying to do a tabletop with a brush, forget about it.
No. The first coat's going to be the problem any way you look at it, I think. What were you going to say, Jordan?
I mean, you can get good results off a brush, but you got to spend a lot of time. Affecting,
I was going to mention this, and I thought I won't, but I will. In that, so I just did this really large dining table top, and I used Danish oil, but I don't think it really matters what the finish is. When the timber is raw, it's going to soak up every last little piece of moisture that you give it. So if you are reaching over and a drop lands on the tabletop and you don't see it, and then you come to it and, there's a drop, I'll just wipe over the drop. That drop, you'll never get rid of that round little ring where it's a darker spot.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly hard to finish a large tabletop. When the finish is drying before you can come back to it, you're going to get overlap marks and streaks. You really need a second person there to help get it on as quickly as possible. After the first coat, it doesn't really matter. You can take your time. You're not going to have that same issue with. But getting that first coat on evenly is definitely a trick if it's a large thing.
Yeah. All right. What I thought we could do now is go to some of the questions. I just see because we are running a bit short of time. So Bill Manson had a question earlier. So he said, "Hi lads, if I build the outdoor table out of Jarrah, is there any reason I can't laminate a solid top and route some draining slots on it? Or do I have to have individual boards on top?" So I guess he's saying, and Bill, if you're still there, if you can chime in from an expansion perspective. Do solid tops work outdoors?
I'm going to say no. Mainly because if you have a dead flat surface, the water's just not going to drain off it for a start. I mean, if you just have a decking board, the water sits on it until it evaporates. It doesn't just leak off. Carry on, Jordan.
I'd be on the no wagon too. I would keep it kind of separate because there's so much movement outside.
Yeah. My question, I suppose, would be, I mean, let's say you did it. I don't know how you would fix it to the base to allow for enough expansion and to hold it flat. I'm not sure. I can think of one very difficult way, like a very long, a series of sliding dovetails. Yeah. But the tabletop's going to have to be at least 50 mil thick. And how you attach, you'd have to have a series of dovetails along the top. And it's just going to turn into a major problem to get it on.
Now, you can do whatever you want, but I wouldn't suggest it.
Surely from the perspective of, you talk about the moisture sitting on it, on a dead flat surface, if it's out in the sun, which I guess kind of may negate the benefits, but surely then it's going to evaporate. I mean, the wood's not just going to sit on there, especially if you've got a decent finish on it.
Yeah, but my example was certainly here at least. If it's rained and there's water on a deck, the water doesn't just go away. It takes quite a while. It might take 4 hours for it to evaporate off the deck.
And is that water doing damage to the timber while it's sitting not in the timber? It's on top of the finish.
I think it would be damage to the finish.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
The other thing I would be worried about with a solid top outside, especially here, is those glue joints failing. Like, there's so much more movement outside that over time, I don't think that solid top would remain solid for that long. Even if a glue says it's fully waterproof and all of that, it's either going to be brittle because of UV damage or something. I just don't see it lasting all that long.
Yeah. I think I think even epoxy could have problems.
Yeah, I mean UV and epoxy are enemies. So I mean, obviously it's sealed between two boards, but it'll still somehow
it can get destroyed on that top edge. I've seen it actually on public things where the wood actually is rotting each side of the epoxy. I've seen, and there's a little strip of epoxy left. For whatever reason, the water sits. There must be a little dip on the join.
Yeah.
And water will sit right there, and the epoxy is left, but and the timber kind of gets eaten away either side. So.
Here's one for you, Joey, from Fabian. What's the best woodworking shop in New Zealand?
What's that? What's a woodworking shop?
Well, I was going to say it might be King Post Timberworks, isn't it?
Yeah. We have a Carbotech. They have good stuff and not so good stuff, but like they have a very good range of hand planes. It's quite good, and they go from very cheap to very expensive. And so that is probably, I'd say, the only place you should be buying any kind of hand tools that are worth, if you really want a decent and want to spend the money. There's lots of machinery shops, but geez, you don't really think you want to get down that road. Otherwise, I actually find I'm buying a lot of stuff direct from the States because in the end it's cheaper. just don't buy over $400 worth in one go. Otherwise, you'll have to pay GST, and it gets held at customs, and they don't tell you about it, and it's sitting there for 3 months, and then yeah, it's not good.
Fun.
All right. What are we on? Let's do one more question. This is from Gareth, who made a point earlier about one of his lessons, so that's why I just want to mention it. A huge lesson for me was take the time to make a jig instead of freehanding. So mitre jigs, tapered leg jig, bevel jigs. Yeah, so I guess the idea is create the jig. Obviously, if you can use it more than once in the build, or in the future, that's good. But this helped me with was my miter saw was using a stop block instead of measuring. And I mean, I know that sounds pretty straightforward, but when I first started, everything was measured and cut. And then I saw a video on YouTube once about using a stop block, and my mind just exploded because it was just so much better. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Gareth. It's very true. But to your question, Jordan Joey, what resin? Apparently, I don't use resin, but it's fair enough. I don't actually know enough about resin. What resin do you recommend, and where do you get it? And the colored pigments also.
Well, mine's easy because I only use one resin, which is the AWST Systems epoxy. They have two hardeners. I think it's 205 and 206 from the top of my head, but there's a fast and a slow. I have all of it on stock at every time. I get it in a 4-liter pump bottle. And the pigment I use is also the AWST Systems Black. They have little squeezy bottles for everything. And where I get it from is Fiberglass and Resin Sales. That's a shop here in Perth, but it's really making its way into any boating shop at the moment as well, I found. The one reason I use that resin over everything else is because it's what I started using when I first started, and it works really well. It's not that I think it's better than anything. It's just a good unit. And with all the fillers and things I add, you can mix it up to be really thin. So if you're doing just, wanting to seal something up, that's fine. But you can also mix it up to be kind of like clag glue, if that's a universal glue, I'm not sure. But wallpaper glue. And then you can have it pretty thick. It's self-supporting on joints while you're gluing it up. It feels... stuff like that. That's my answer.
Yeah, I use mainly international epoxy, and international make a whole lot of boat resins and glues and stuff. It's essentially the same as the AWST Systems. So the international stuff is, I can actually get it from Guthrie Barron, which is a paint shop here, and I can get AWST Systems from there as well. I buy the 4-liter pump version as well. So you have I think 1 pump of resin to 1 pump of hardener. It's expensive as heck here. I'm not sure what you pay, Jordan, but if I'm going to buy a 4-liter of resin, it's about $280.
Oh wow, okay, that's I mean, I spend probably $200 for resin, hardener, and pumps.
Right, that's pretty good.
Yeah. That is also trade price, so I shouldn't have said that out loud.
So if you're in New Zealand, you can pretty much get those resins in any hardware store. I think even Mitre 10 have it on the shelf. My trick for pigments, so if I want black, I have bought a container of black oxide, and that is used for coloring concrete. And they make a bunch of different colors. It's about $10 for a liter jar, and you will never run out of it. I mean, you only need a few specks of it to change the color of resin. It's very good at changing the glue colors. I use it all the time. On walnut, I'll change resin to black, or any glue to black if I don't want to, if I've got issues with glue lines and stuff. But I guess my best trick for coloring resins is to use the sawdust of the timber you're using. So if you can, I find it difficult to catch my sanding dust now because I have it hooked up to a vacuum. But if you just have your sander hooked up to the bag that comes on the orbital sanders, collect that dust, add that into the epoxy, and it will go exactly the same color as the timber, and you won't have issues with if you want a clear look, unless you want a black look. Use
on the sawdust. Well, on 2 notes actually. On the sawdust front, I've always been told by the supplier that you shouldn't use sawdust if it's for like structural, but it's fine for filling. I don't know how true it is. It's just a supplier. So
to me that sounds like them saying don't do that, but buy my filler. But
exactly, and covering their butt. But just make it apparent. But the other pigment which I know a lot of people use is, this is just for black, is artist charcoal, ground up really fine, and not just a small teaspoon of that, not even a teaspoon, is enough to make it black completely. So that's another good kind of cheap pigment for it.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I didn't actually realize that you could use the oxide powder in epoxy. I just assumed that it was, because I've used it before for concrete, but I didn't know that you could use it in glues.
Well, oxide is just a natural pigment coloring. So, and you use such a tiny amount. Seriously, like Jordan just said, a teaspoon of charcoal, which is way,
that would do 10 liters almost.
Yeah, that would do a bucket load. Like you don't need any, and so the tiny amount that you're adding to the chemical mixture is just about negligent.
I see Mark has just said that West, I assume you mean West System, sell carbon dust. So clearly it's it's a thing. Yeah, it's interesting because I've still got some of mine left over from when I did my concrete countertop. So I should just start using that, because I've always used the pigments, but that's because that's I don't know what you call it, methylated spirits based.
Okay.
Can't really use it in a water-based glue. It's just going to separate. So
try.
Just mix really, really vigorously. Yeah. Cool. All right. So what have you guys been watching recently? Well, I'll start. There's a guy that I've been watching for quite a while. His name's Wes Hamstra. He is a Canadian woodworker. He's got very cool videos. They're very clean. The whole design process, all of that is fantastic. And it was probably about a month ago he released, I only saw it the other day. I must have just missed it, but I saw it the other day. He made a mid-century modern inspired coffee table, and we've seen a few of those before. But there was a couple of the joinery methods that he used that I thought were quite clever. And now they're more on the novice side of things. And Wes, I hope you don't mind me saying that, because it's nothing too fancy. It's not some of those Japanese types of joints. But for someone like myself watching that, I got so much out of it because of the way he filmed it and what he showed. But Wes puts out a fair few videos. He's in my opinion, a really good channel to watch if you are trying to learn some new tricks. So Wes Hamstra.
Cool.
I've got three, but only two that are still active. This is one I was binge watching for the first few days of my recovery, and that was Engel's Coach Shop. So really awesome channel of a coach builder, just either restoring old, coaches, or making them from scratch. And he does everything from the woodworking and the forging and everything. It's awesome just to watch a master do his craft. So that's the one I've been binge watching. The other one, which I found, but he's no longer active on YouTube, but good to go check him out, is Simon Heslop, Heslop. I think he's UK based by the accent. And he just makes a lot of his own machines and stuff. And I just really got into it. Cool. And then one that, Rob, you just reminded me of by saying Japanese is Ishanti Furniture.
Yeah, I've seen a few of them.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Just amazing woodworking videos. Nothing, no words, no nothing. Just
good work.
Calm.
Yep.
Yeah.
I really haven't had much time for watching because I've been moving house, but I have been getting on a bit of a blacksmithing buzz lately. So I've been obviously watching a lot of Alex Steele, but I stumbled across, apparently 8 million people already know about the King of Random. So I was watching some of his forging videos. Just kind of he just does. He's not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. He's just showing you all his mistakes and everything. And I thought it was pretty cool stuff.
That the one that he makes the forge in the bucket, which doubles as a pot plant. That's yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I watched a bunch of them actually just at lunchtime today, watching him try to forge a copper gear, and it's just having all sorts of problems with it. So.
I've seen that one. Yeah. Speaking of one last thing, speaking of the move, Joey, how did it go? Are you all in settled? Everything?
Yeah, pretty good. We've still got a few boxes around. I've still got to make a whole lot of shelving, bookcases, and a desk, and all sorts of stuff, and a dining table, and chairs, and lots of things. But otherwise, we're pretty much in, and I have internet, which is good.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I hope we get to hear the story of that. Was that guitar behind you the one that you told? When was it? In the okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's the guitar. That's like the first thing I made when I was just halfway through chemo or something like that. Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, that about sums it up, guys. Thanks very much to all the people in the chat. Thank you very much for all the people who asked some questions. That's really, that's some of them were pretty good. What we might do is next week we'll run the show, and then at the end we'll sort of say, does anyone have any questions, just so we can keep them all grouped together in case we miss any. We don't want to miss any. So thank you to everyone who asked a question. Other than that is, there's no other questions. That's perfect. All right, guys. Well, thanks very much for tuning in. As I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, we will have this out on iTunes. So if you do want to listen to it on podcast, you can. And if there's anything more from Jordan, Joey?
All good.
All good from me.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks very much. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you next week.
See you guys.